Hey guys! If you're new to Fresh is Real, I'm Chantal and I love to transform recipes into plant-based and allergen-friendly options. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a beautiful gluten-free vegan bread machine loaf. This will be a two-part video, and in the first one, I'm going to show you exactly how to make this recipe, and then in the second one it will be a bonus video to answer a few questions about the process, the ingredients I decided to go with, and just a few extra questions along the way. So keep watching and I'll show you exactly how to make this. This bread recipe is actually really simple, but we will need some plant milk. So today I'm going to show you how to make some hemp milk. It's actually very easy. You need 1/3 of a cup of hemp seeds or hemp hearts. And you can use a small blender or a larger high-speed blender. And I'm going to mix the 1/3 of a cup of hemp seeds with just a little over 1 cup of water, about 1 1/4. But I will list all the measurements and ingredients below in the description. So I'm just going to blend this for at most 1 minute. So I will show you here. And then we're going to put it through this mesh bag. So it's as simple as that, and you're just basically blending the seeds with the water in order to create like a frothy milk. It's actually really gorgeous. This makes really great like milkshakes if you ever want to try it, or smoothies. So then I am just gonna pour the milk through a mesh bag. Sometimes they're labeled as nut mesh bags, or you can use a cheesecloth. Anything that can help you remove some of the larger bits is really great. So this should give me just a little bit more than a cup. So we might use the whole thing in the recipe. So you want to discard the larger bits that were left in the mesh bag, and then we're going to put this aside for when we need it. So now we're going to go ahead and combine all the ingredients, mix it in a bowl. Today I'm going to mix it in a glass bowl because I want you to see how much it's going to rise in about a 3-hour span. This recipe has 11 ingredients. You don't have to use plant milk. In all the tests I've made, using a combination of water and milk does create the best loaf. So we are going to mix the ingredients for this very simple bread machine loaf. And I think for today we're going to start by mixing the yeast and with the warm water. So when I say warm, it just feels warm to the touch. It's not cold and it's definitely not hot. It will help. The reason that warm water helps or is good for yeast is because it will actually just make everything rise a little bit faster for a recipe like this one. And then usually I might let this sit for 5 minutes or so, but just for today, I'm going to proceed and add the psyllium husk. I'm going to put it in the water today. Sometimes I just combine it with the dry ingredients and mix it, but I think it's a really good example or to show you how it actually does expand in the water. Psyllium is what helps to bind gluten-free vegan meaning no eggs or dairy in bread recipes. Some people can tolerate it, some people don't do so well with it, and if you can't use psyllium, you can use flax, sometimes a combination of flax and chia. Personally, it's usually okay with me. So in this recipe, there's 2 tablespoons of psyllium. So I'm just mixing it. And again, if I was just doing this on my own, I might let it sit 5 to 10 minutes before adding the other ingredients because it does kind of like just expand and absorb all the water. So this looks good for now. And so the recipe itself includes a combination of flours, starches, and a nut or seed flour. On my site, I share allergen-friendly recipes, so I mostly use seeds, but if you have no allergies to almonds or nuts of any sorts, you can definitely use a nut flour for this as well. So we're gonna start with rice flour. We're adding white rice flour, and I'm sifting the flours and the starches because if you don't sift them, sometimes the starches can get a little clumpy in the recipe, so it's always better to sift everything just to make sure that it blends nicely together. So that was white rice, and we're adding brown rice flour as well. We are adding buckwheat flour. We are today adding a combination of, I had a little bit of almond flour or almond meal left from another recipe, and I just wanted to use it, but I did combine it with a sunflower seed flour. And when I say sunflower seed flour, I basically just take raw organic sunflower seeds and I mill them either in that little blender that you just saw when I made the hemp milk, or I will use a spice grinder. And if you have a grain mill, just by all means use that too, but you want to transform it into a flour. When making bread, any types of bread, whether it's a yeasted loaf or a sourdough loaf, using the freshest ingredients always helps a lot. So that's another reason that when I make my own milk, homemade milk, whether you use hemp seeds or you use nuts or seeds like sunflower or pumpkin or even sesame seeds, making your own at home means that it's basically just the seed and the water and no other ingredients. If you buy plant milks in the store, there's often gums or other preservatives. So if you can, it's best to avoid. So making it at home helps you to have better control on the ingredient list. So we're gonna proceed with adding these starches. In this recipe, I'm including potato starch, and I'm also including tapioca starch. And usually in my recipes, I use arrowroot because I had heard somewhere that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that tapioca might be a little bit more processed than arrowroot, but I don't know for a fact, but I wanted to try it out. So this is tapioca, and it kind of acts very similarly to arrowroot. And in bread, it's very important to add salt. If not, your bread is not going to taste very good. So in this case, I use a really good quality fine gray sea salt, and that I'm adding half a tablespoon, and usually that is sufficient for a smaller loaf. Another detail too, you'll get to notice that a lot of my recipes have approximately 3 to 3.5 cups of flour, and then with the other few ingredients, and that usually yields, a smaller loaf. And also my loaves do include, on average, at least 1 tablespoon of either coconut palm sugar. You can use maple syrup, you can use organic cane sugar, but today I'm using palm sugar because it is one of my favorites to use in gluten-free and vegan breads. So we are gonna push everything through the sieve, again, just to make sure that there's no clumps. If this gets a little messy, that's okay. So the reason I wanted to share with you guys a bread machine loaf is because sometimes in the summertime, we don't want to turn on an oven and preheat it for like 45 minutes and then bake a loaf for an hour, right? Or just turn it on the oven for a whole hour and a half just to bake a small loaf. So having a bread machine, and mine is new. I've never owned a bread machine in my life. I bought it last summer with some birthday money, and I was kind of like a little bit hesitant to use it because you look in the books that come with bread machines, and there's often regular recipes, there's sourdough recipes, there's whole wheat white, but all the recipes have eggs, all the recipes have gluten. So actually, I shouldn't say all, but for this one, which is the Bread Man, it did have gluten-free recipes, but they all have eggs. So I wanted to create my own and then share it with you so you could also have a recipe to use or to make in your bread machine if you have one and haven't used it in a long time. So we already have the 1 cup of water at the bottom, and we're adding all the milk, which is about 1 1/4 cup, because you will need that extra hydration to make this loaf work. I've tested it with less. I've tested it with 1 1/2 cups. I've tested it with 2, but that 2 1/4 just seems to really work well. So as you can see, it's quite dry and crumbly, so we do need to go ahead and add the plant milk. At home, if you want to mix the ingredients in a mixing bowl like this, and then once you're done and it's very, very well mixed and incorporated, then you can go ahead and put this dough in the bread machine pan right away. But because I'm filming, I want to show you what the dough is going to look like once it rises. So just for today, what I will do is let the dough rise in the bowl, and then I'll transfer it and bake it. Don't be afraid to mix it really well. Because you want to make sure that all the ingredients are incorporated and that you're not left with dry flour at the bottom, which is often the case if you are not careful. Can you use a mixer to mix this? You could if you want to, but in my case, I prefer not to, because then it's another machine for me to wash. So I just like doing it by hand. That way it's kind of like almost easier, and all I have to wash is this bowl. Another good reason that I don't mix it directly in here is, first of all, I don't want to scratch my container. And if you use like a soft spatula to mix it, I find it doesn't really combine the ingredients really well. So by mixing it in a different bowl, you're like making super sure that all your ingredients are mixed. So what I'm doing right now, I'm scraping at the bottom, making sure that there's no dry ingredients. And it's going to cover this, and we will check back in 3 hours. And I might show you the progress along the way. If you have a marker, piece of tape, something, an elastic, you can actually mark your dough with it, and then at least you can gauge if it's actually increased in size. We're not looking to double the dough, but we wanted to at least go, you know, a little bit over the line. So after 3 hours, it should at least increase by 1 inch. That's that. So I will check back with you later, and then I'll show you the progress. All right. As you can see, the dough is looking really good, and I think it's ready to bake. It's increased in size at least by 1 inch over the mark that I did this morning, so I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do now is transfer the dough to the bread machine pot, and then we are going to bake it. That's as simple as that. So I will try to be careful when transferring the dough because it will deflate a little bit, but that's okay. I will just do it gently. You could have mixed the ingredients and then transfer the dough to the bread machine pan and then let the dough rise in there, but I just felt that it was easier to show you this way so you can actually see how well the dough did. So I'm going to, so it comes out pretty nicely. Alright, I'm just going to try to shape it a little bit, not too much. So I'm basically just going around the edges I'm not flattening the dough at the top. I'm just going around the edges, and then I'm just gonna smooth it out a little bit, and then that's it. So I'm gonna show you here. That's what it looks like. I'm gonna show you there what it looks like. And then I'm going to put this in the bread machine. And again, I'm using the bake only setting. I'm gonna plug my machine. And if I choose bake only, then you have to increase the time, and I'm gonna set it to 1 hour and 10 minutes. And once it's ready, I will show you what it looks like. That's simple. We are back now. The bread machine has just beeped, so the loaf is ready. So we're gonna remove it from the bread machine, and I'm gonna show you what it looks like. Be careful, it's really hot when you open up your machine. I'm gonna unplug it because we are done. You can get the help of a knife or tool just to lift up the little handle. And I'm gonna pull it out. And in most cases, I think they always recommend taking the loaf out of the pan. The pot is hot, so we have to be careful, but I'm just going to show this camera what it looks like, and this camera what it looks like, and then I think it will come out if I just put it upside down, but there it is. There it is. I was being careful because a bread machine does have a pin underneath. Although I did only bake the loaf in the bread machine, there is still like a hole, but it's just like a smaller hole. The loaf itself is very hot. So with gluten-free vegan bread recipes, when you remove them from the oven, the container, or whatever, you need to let them cool because they're still setting as they cool down. And this could take a few hours, 4 to 6 hours, or you can let your loaf cool overnight. That's great. So while today's loaf cools down, I'm gonna enjoy a slice from yesterday's bake. And while I do that, go ahead and check out the bonus video, as it might help answer some of your questions for this recipe. If you have additional ones, just feel free to ask them in the comments below or directly in the recipe post on freshesreal.com. So I thank you for watching this video, and before we go, I just wanted to say a super big thank you to all the new subscribers. It means a lot to me that you're following my channel. It actually really does encourage me to keep making videos just like this one. So a huge thank you, and we will see you in the next video. Bye for now.